Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 47 of the FilmBrony podcast. I'm of course Nick Canino, the guy that is in charge of the whole podcast. And with me, I have a guest with me, who started this whole podcast. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you pretty much know who I am, Søren and FilmBrony. I make my own videos, review movies and such. Yeah.
All right. Well, guys. Well, today it's going to be an interesting podcast. We got some remaining May and June films we're going to be talking about, as well as the main event, the worst and best movies that both Soren and I saw this year so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting podcast. We'll save the worst and best thing for the best films for last, but until then, yeah. Welcome to the podcast, guys. Welcome Jose and welcome Ethan. Thanks for joining us. So, why don't we get started? Starting with Blu-ray Showcase.
All right. I got All About My Mother by Almodovar. Blackberry.
That's a great film.
The comfort of
All About My Mother.
the comfort of strangers.
Nice.
The Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
Great film.
The Hudsucker Proxy, one of the Coen brothers' more underrated films. Hypnotic.
I'm not gonna say anything.
The Ice Storm.
That's a great film.
I Saw the TV Glow. Love Lies Bleeding.
Sweet.
A Man for All Seasons. Monty Python's first movie, and now for something completely different. I'll have to get their other films down the line. Nail by Mouth. Reversal of Fortune.
That's a great film.
Secrets and Lies.
The Mike Leigh film that I loved.
Talk to Me.
One of the best horror films I saw this decade so far.
To Die For.
Great film.
Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. And I have one more movie down the line, but that's for the pick of the show later on.
Sweet. All right. I got a couple Blu-rays with me, and all of them you'll be seeing later on when we do the worst and best, when we do the best films of the year list so far. So here we go. Monkey Man.
I'll have to get that.
Civil War.
Another film I'll have to get.
Challengers.
Good movie.
And finally, last but not least, The Fall Guy.
One of the better films of the summer so far.
Couldn't have said better myself. Also, you guys may have noticed. Yes, I'm in a new house, which is why the background is a lot different. So,
yeah.
But anyway, let's go ahead and
all right.
Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the movies that we saw in June.
All right. First,
and let me. Go ahead.
First, I have Robot Dreams, and this movie was kind of frustrating to say the least. The first half the first act of this movie was absolutely brilliant, showcasing this dog who builds a robot and they develop a close companionship. And the third act was just as good too, taking a turn I didn't really expect. But then there's a second act which really dragged the movie down. It was so damn boring and repetitive, and it relied way too much of these dream sequences. I'm not kidding, this movie has more dream sequences than Inception. Basically, nothing happens throughout this middle part. You could literally cut most of it out and miss nothing. Sure, it would be just under an hour long, but it would have been better than a really. But it would have been better as a really good less than an hour movie than an hour and a half movie where you're just clenching your fist in frustration for half the movie. So while this is still a good movie, don't expect the Oscar-worthy masterpiece you've been hearing about for the past few months. So I'll give Robots Dreams the seal of accuracy.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this movie. First movie I'm gonna talk about is the R-rated comedy Babes. Now, for those who don't know what Babes is, I was interested in checking this one out, given the fact that the actress that voiced Bobby Hill from King of the Hill, as well as Spinelli from Recess, was making its directorial debut. Was directing a movie for the very first time. Yes, Pamela Adlon is her name, and this movie stars Alana Glazer and Michelle Buteau. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but basically it's about it's about like them. Hey Rocky, welcome to the show. Hold on, let me okay, here we go. Okay, so basically it goes something like this. Pregnant from a one-night stand, Eden leans on her best friend and mother of two, Dawn, to guide her through gestation and beyond. Now, I was intrigued to check this one out because because of the fact that that's involving like pregnancy, and given the fact that as I stated before, the actress that voiced Spinelli from Recess and Bobby Hill from King of the Hill was going to be directing this movie. And here's what I'll say about the film. It's the directing was very good. Most of the acting was good, especially from Michelle Buteau, who is easily the best part of the whole film. And Alana Glazer is actually really good in the film too. And she and Michelle do deliver some good chemistry in the film too. Like you could tell it makes you believe that they're actually best friends. So it's got great cinematography. I love that 20% of the jokes landed, especially the lactation joke, which actually made me laugh so hard. The editing was decent, and the ending was over. And I did like the ending overall. It was a solid ending. However, I really wasn't a fan of this one. In fact, as of right now, this movie, at the time we're doing this podcast, this movie so far has like Babes is holding like a 90% Rotten Tomatoes and a 74 on Metacritic. I don't know, 73 on Metacritic and 89% on Rotten Tomatoes and 73 on Metacritic. And this is one of those times where here's a question I want to ask. Have you ever had one of those times where you feel like you're alone because because you see people praising the film, but then like you see the film for yourself and you really feel underwhelmed with what you just witnessed? That's how I felt when I saw Babes. Yeah, I really did not like this movie. In fact, Babes is my pick for the most overrated movie I've seen this year so far. Yeah. The critics have been like, most of the critics have been praising this one as being like the bridesmaids of baby making, and that really threw me off a bit because, yeah, both of them are R-rated comedies and stuff, but what does Bridesmaids have anything to do with like baby making or pregnancy? What does that have anything to do with it? The story felt cliched and uninteresting. The screenplay was an overwritten mess, especially with how unfunny and clunky the dialogue felt. Stephen James and Oliver Platt feel horribly wasted in the movie since they're not given that much to do. The soundtrack felt obnoxious, a lot of pacing issues here and there. It goes for cliche, and this is one of those movies where I've seen this all before. I've seen this done in better films before. Yeah, this is one of those times where it goes for cliches that you've seen in other films before. And the biggest problem with this movie is that 80% of the jokes in Babes fell very, very flat, especially with how shoehorned in the poop and vagina jokes felt. Like, I'm not even kidding. This movie throws a lot of poop and vagina jokes that feel shoehorned in and just feels stale at this, very stale at this point. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of this one. Babes features good performances. Oh yeah, and one last thing. How about throwing in a shoehorn in a pop political joke involving Mitch McConnell? I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. By the way, they decided to go for the lowest common denominator by referencing by excuse me by referencing a politician Mitch McConnell as for the sake of a joke. Now, again, I'm apolitical when it comes to this stuff, so I don't want to get myself dragged in politics and stuff. But yeah, as I stated before in the past, keep the political shit at I'm getting really sick of political jokes being shoehorned in comedy films like this. And to answer your question, no. Okay, so overall, Babes features some good performances and chemistry by Alana Glazer and Michelle Butel, and there are some funny and heartfelt moments here and there, but the film felt cliche and frustratingly unfunny. It's an easy contender for the most overrated movie I've seen this year so far, and that's why I'm gonna have to give Babes a 5 out of 10 or a C plus. I really wasn't a fan of this film. Hey Joshua, welcome to the show.
Next we have Hitman, and
yeah, really.
Next, we have Hitman, and this movie is Richard Linklater's latest, in which Glenn Powell plays his undercover agent in charge of leading criminals to justice. The movie features a solid cast, especially from the main lead, and it has some good writing from both him and the director, leading to some humorous moments. However, it can drag at times, especially concerning a romance, which, while still okay, does kind of get in the way of the main plot. So while this isn't necessarily Linklater's best, I'll still recommend this as a fun espionage comedy, and I'll give it the seal of approval.
Oh boy. Well, oh boy, Hitman. Well, for those who don't know, I'm a fan of Richard Linklater. I feel like Boyhood, the Before trilogy, as well as Days and Confused are some of the best movies that he's done. Oh yeah, and Waking Life. But to be honest, with you guys, I have been I haven't been a fan of his I have not been a fan of his last three movies. Like Last Black Flying was fine. Where'd You Go, Bernadette was easily his weakest movie so far, and Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood, was one of the more disappointing and overrated movies I've seen this decade so far. This, I am so happy to report that this is the return to form for Richard Linklater. This was a smart, funny, clever, seductive, and wildly entertaining film that not only had me laughing, but also on the edge of my seat. And that's thanks to not only how well directed Richard Linklater's directing felt, but how well written the screenplay that he and Glenn Powell wrote was fantastic due to the dialogue feeling well written and the characterization feeling three-dimensional and fleshed out. The story also felt highly engaging. The acting was terrific. Glenn Powell gives out one of his finest performances of his career as Gary Johnson. And Adria Arjona, who plays Madison, was fantastic in the film too. And the chemistry between her and Glenn Powell, pitch perfect. Excellent soundtrack, terrific cinematography, brilliant editing, great pacing. And what I loved about this movie was how well executed the comedy felt as well. Like my goodness, the line deliveries, the line deliveries and the jokes they threw in the film are nothing short of astounding. There was also a plot twist that felt clever and unpredictable. And on top of that, it also has one of my favorite endings I've seen in the movie this entire year so far. Yeah, overall, it's one of the best movies I've seen in 2024 so far. It's a brilliant return to form. It's a brilliant return to form for Richard Linklater, and I'm so happy to give this one what it absolutely deserves. Hitman, without a doubt, gets a 10 out of 10 or an A+. Well done, Richard Linklater. Well done.
Next is The Dead Don't Hurt, and this is Viggo Mortensen's foray into the directing chair, and as a director, his talents shine through. It's got good cast, good music, good cinematography and production values, and it's got some tense scenes here and there. However, the scene can't be said for its writing, as this movie was incredibly boring. Nothing happens throughout most of this. The plot doesn't kick in until halfway, and even then, you will have to sit through boring scenes of characters meandering around before you get to see something relevant to the story. This movie isn't terrible by any means, but it's definitely a long, boring, and forgettable western, which I'll give the seal mediocrity.
The Diarrhea Avalanche Dump Poo Field movie. Shit.
You'll hear about it down the line.
Yeah, really. We'll talk about that when we do the worst films of the year list so far. Don't worry. Okay. Okay, next movie, and this is to close off the May films is. Oh wait, I have two more May films. First one I'm going to talk about is the new Disney film, Young Woman in the Sea, and Young Woman in the Sea is the true story of. And Young Woman in the Sea is the true story of an American competitive swimmer who became the first woman. Her name is Gertrude at Ederle. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but she became the first competitive swimmer she was an American competitive swimmer who became the first woman to swim across the English Channel. Now, I was interested in checking this one out, given the fact that Daisy Ridley was in the movie, and it's about it's a sports drama where it's involving a woman who like swam many miles to the English Channel. Oh God, don't even think about it. I mean, Chris Pratt was good as Emmett, and he was good as Mario, not as Garfield. And him as the genie from Aladdin, get that shit out of here. Anyway,
it's only a matter of time that they cast Chris Pratt as Peter Venkman, especially since Lawrence Music and Bill Murray also played both roles.
Yeah, really. At this point, it's just becoming nothing more than well, it was all actually it was already a meme. I don't know. That is true. And the Chris Pratt voices just keep coming in. They just keep coming in. So I was interested in it anyway. But anyway, that's what I was saying about Young Woman in the Sea before we get off topic. I was interested in checking this one out, given the fact that Daisy Ridley was in it, and this is involving like an American competitive swimmer who became the first woman to swim across the English Channel. Yes, you guys have. So I was interested in checking that movie out, given those things I mentioned, and I really like this movie. In fact, this is something I wish Disney would just go back to doing, since they rarely do biographical sports films anymore, and this one is a nice return to form for them. The story felt highly engaging. Jeff Nathanson's screenplay was surprisingly solid with how well written the dialogue felt. It's very well directed. The acting was terrific. Daisy Ridley was outstanding as Trudy. This is one of, if not the best performances she's given out in her career. And all the other actors do a fantastic job too, including Tilda Gobham Hervey, Stephen Graham, and Glenn Fleshler. The musical score is fantastic and one of the best I've heard in the movie this year so far. It's got terrific cinematography, excellent production values and costume design. The swimming sequences were fantastic in the way they were shot and edited. There were some moments of humor sprinkled into the midst that I did appreciate. And not only was the ending very satisfying, but this is one of those rare times where its main themes of female empowerment felt very well executed, as well as daring and perseverance. I don't know what I said there, but yeah, both the themes of female empowerment and daring felt well executed. As for issues with the film, though, I'll say that I'll say that I'll say this: there were a couple pacing issues in the middle, and there were some editing choices that did feel uneven at times. But that's it. Overall, Young Woman to See features a tour de force knockout performance by Daisy Ridley, and I found this movie to be highly engaging, delightful, entertaining, and inspirational. So, yeah, 8 out of 10 or B plus. I really like this movie. Yes, I did hear about that. That's a shame. Thanks. You know what? Thanks, David Zasloff. Okay, and then last but not least, to close off May is Ezra. Now, Ezra is directed by Tony Goldwyn, and it stars Bobby Cannavale, Rose Byrne, Robert De Niro, and Tony Goldwyn, and Vera Farmiga, as well as Whoopi Goldberg. Yep. Yeah, really. Thank goodness. And basically, this movie is about a divorced stand-up comedian named Matt Burnell, who struggles to raise his autistic son Ezra, and forced to confront difficult decisions about the boy's future. Max and Ezra embark on a cross-country road trip that has a transcendent impact on both of their lives. Right off the bat, I want to mention this. Props to Tony Goldwyn and the writers of this movie for portraying like a character with autism who has autism as a real person. Like the way Ezra is set up as a character felt realistic and well executed. And I have to give props to the writer. I have to give props to the writer. To writer Tony Spiridakis. He did a very good job with the way he managed to. He did a wonderful job with the way he managed to write this character who has autism as a Ezra who has autism as a real person. And given that I'm on the autistic spectrum myself, I was very impressed with how they did it. I was very impressed with how they portrayed that kid as a real person, not some stupid like cartoon character that not some stupid cartoon character that feels like disrespectful and like exploitative. Hello, William the Conqueror. Welcome to the podcast. Yeah, that's what I really liked about Ezra. And the kid that played Ezra, his name is William Fitzgerald. He stole the entire show. He did a wonderful job with the way he portrayed Ezra. But that's not the only reason why I like this movie. The story felt highly engaging. Tony Goldwyn's directing was very good. The screenplay was very good, mainly in terms of its dialogue and characterization, and its brilliant realistic depiction of a person with autism. The acting, especially from Bobby Cannavale, Rose Byrne, Robert De Niro, Vera Farmiga, Whoopi Goldberg, Rainn Wilson, and Tony Goldwyn was terrific. While, as I stated before, William Fitzgerald stole the entire show as a titular character. It's got a good soundtrack, excellent cinematography, solid editing, great humor, a very good ending, which I'm not going to spoil. I'm not going to give away. And it was overall. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and some good humor sprinkled into the mix. Yeah. Yes, and as I stated before, Robert De Niro was very good in the film. As for issues with the film, there were a couple pacing issues here and there, and there were some decisions that did come across as questionable, but that's it. I really enjoyed Ezra, and I really enjoyed Ezra, and I'm and this is one of the better depictions of a person with autism I've ever seen on film. I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to give Ezra an 8 out of 10 or B+.
Next is Bad Boys Ride or Die. Now, you'd think that the directors of the last movie would make lightning strike twice after they struck gold with the last movie, and that they had the last laugh on David Zaslav after the whole Batgirl fiasco. And while this movie's box office certainly solidified their last laugh on Zaslav, it didn't exactly result in a satisfying sequel. I will say Will Smith and Martin Lawrence still shine as the titular bad boys, but they can't save the script from being a boring and generic mess. The comedy didn't really hit as hard as before, and the action scenes range from really fun to really overblown. So while this isn't a terrible movie by any means, it's certainly a far cry from the surprise masterpiece that was Bad Boys for Life. And I'll only recommend this to hardcore fans of the franchise. For everyone else, though, it gets to seal mediocrity.
I agree with you that it's a step down. It's a bit of a step down from Bad Boys for Life, as the story did feel all over the place at times, especially with how there's too much going on. The villains, dear Lord, they couldn't have felt even more generic. Like they are literally, they felt generic and so cliched. There's a couple of pacing issues in the middle, and there were a couple of editing choices that in the film that felt uneven. 30% of the jokes fall very flat, and the biggest problem I have with the film is that it's very predictable, especially in its plot twist and reveal. But it is overall a solid film. The acting was good, especially from Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, who once again steal the entire show as Mike and Marcus, and they have great chemistry in the film. The screenplay was solid, with it containing solid dialogue. The directing was very good. Lauren Baumbach's musical score was solid. It's got very good cinematography. The actors, and not only did 70% of the jokes landed, with most of it coming from Martin Lawrence's character, but the action sequences were also a lot of fun to watch, including this one big highlight involving, I'm not going to give it away, but let's just say it's involving like Reggie. Yeah, that, like, what he does in the film, oh man. I'm not going to give it away, but what he does in the film was amazing. And on top of that, the ending was solid too. Yes, it is. And yes, it is, Ethan. This is the first good movie by Columbia Pictures this year so far. Overall, despite it being a step down from Bad Boys for Life, Bad Boys Ride or Die is regardless a fun and solid addition. A fun and solid addition to the Bad Boys movies, featuring good performances and chemistry by Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. Yeah, 7 out of 10 or B. I did like the film overall. If you're a huge fan of Bad Boys, this one is a must watch. And now, well, Søren, we got a real juicy one.
Next up is The Watchers. Much like Sofia Coppola and Brandon Cronenberg, Isana Night Shyamalan takes a step in her father's footsteps in directing her first movie, and it's safe to say that she's got a future ahead of her. The story about a young woman who comes across a forest filled with these hostile creatures is consistently engaging thanks to a screenplay which is filled with intriguing lore and twists throughout. The acting is really good, the music is tense, and the visuals are both gothic, creepy, and stunning, from the cinematography to the design of these things. After this movie, I'm eager to see what Shanna does next, because she has demonstrated the potential to have as great of a career as her father, or maybe even better. I'll give The Watchers a seal cinema.
boy, are we in a huge disagreement with this one. I thought it was because for me, I thought it was idiotic, unscary, stupid, and absolutely boring throughout. I'm not even kidding. The Watchers. I'm not even kidding. Even for M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, Ashana, making her directorial debut, this is a very bad start. This, I'm not kidding, guys. This was a very bad start. This was a very bad start. Like, to me, it felt like Ashana was basically trying to follow what her father, M. Night, does with the way he crafts his movies. And honestly, this makes it one of the most boring movies I've sat through this year so far. Now, there are some things I did like about the film. It's got excellent cinematography, great production design, excellent sound design, and a good musical score, too. Unfortunately, it didn't save the movie from being one of the worst and most boring movies I've sat through this year so far. And yeah, really, I am definitely going to call it the Dumb Watchers for sure. So, anyway, let's talk about what I absolutely hated about the Dumb Watchers and why this is one of the worst movies I've seen this year so far. The story was a contrived and meandering mess. And it's really sad how even despite how you see the vision that Ashana Night Shyamalan had behind the camera, it sadly disappears due to how messy and misguided her directing felt. And her screenplay, dear fucking Lord, along with atrocious dialogue, the characterization was terrible, especially since you don't care about any of the characters in the film due to how paper thin and poorly developed they felt. The acting, while not terrible, wasn't that great. Dakota Fanning and Georgina Campbell are both horribly wasted in this movie as a result of the characters feeling poorly developed. And the actor that played Daddyo was terrible, especially with some of the unintentionally hilarious frightened faces like he pulls, like. Like, what the fuck was that? Shit watchers. Yeah, because this movie was yeah, it's like polishing a turd. It's a no matter how much you try to make it, Except if you were still to clean it, it's still a turd. You know you can't polish a turd, right, Beavis? Yeah, still a turd. It's still a turd. Okay, so it's clumsily edited. The pacing was all over the place. It's filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before. And one of my biggest issues with this movie is that the second half of the film is nothing but exposition dump dialogue. Like the massive amount of exposition they threw in the film felt extremely forced and they completely destroyed the film. Like, for goodness sake, guys, we can pick up what's going on by ourselves. We don't need you to spout some unnecessary exposition dump. The twists and reveals made no sense, and the ending felt anticlimactic and underwhelming. Yeah, this is one of the worst movies I've seen this year so far. The Watchers has a couple of creepy moments in the first half and an eerie atmosphere, but they were not enough to save this movie from being such a misguided, contrived, and meandering mess. Originally, I was going to give this a 3 out of 10 or a D+, but the more I thought about the twists and reveals as well as the ending and how they didn't make any goddamn sense whatsoever and how it treated its audience like they're stupid by their and how it treated its audience like they're stupid by throwing in a bunch of unnecessary exposition dump, the more I decided to lower it down to a 2 out of 10. Or a D. This is one of the worst films of the year so far, and I'll definitely talk more about this later on when we do the worst films of the year list so far. But trust me, it'll be on there for sure. Ishana, whatever you do next, you better hope it's better. And if you want to succeed in the filmmaking business, you got to do something that's like all your own. You can't just basically copy your father's. Just saying. All right, moving on.
Next, we have Inside Out 2. And given how well the first one turned out, it's safe to say Pixar had a tough act to follow in terms of making the sequel. And after seeing this movie, I got good news and bad news. The bad news is this movie isn't really as good as the original film, because the good news is it's even better. This movie maintains the same emotional storytelling as the first movie, while also taking the story in bold new directions, especially when it comes to the cast. Amy Poehler, Phyllis Smith, and the others still shine in their respective roles, and Lisa Lapra and Tony Hale are so good as distrust and anger that the casting is barely noticeable. And we also get new characters such as Ayo Adelbri as Envy, Adele E as Ennui, but it's Maya Hawke as anxiety that makes this movie. Like an antagonist, you kind of see where she's going, but unlike someone like Magnifico, where you're like, yeah, is it just me, or was he kind of right on things? Here, while you do kind of see where she's going, you also realize that what she's doing isn't for the greater good. And going into this movie, I thought I was going to have a problem with this being more of the same as the first movie, where Joy and the others had to wander around Riley's mind to stop fellow emotions from ruining her life. However, much like Toy Story 4, the story may be familiar, but the characters have developed in ways that make sense and make this more than a retread. Honestly, after the slew of mediocre animated films and the skepticism I have for the future, it's going to be hard to top this as the best animated film of the year. It's the kind of movie that has something for everyone, as kids will get a kick out of the visuals and characters, while the adults will find themselves connected to the story, emotions, and themes this movie is going for. This movie gets an enthusiastic seal of cinema.
I absolutely love this movie, and I feel it's one of the best movies I've seen this year so far. Now, I still love the first Inside Out film just a bit more, but this was nevertheless a great movie. A great movie, and easily the best animated film I've seen this year so far. What I loved about its story was that it takes what people love about the first film, and it expands it. It expands it with more emotions, and as a result of this, the story felt highly engaging and well structured. The writing was clever, the directing was excellent, the voice acting was terrific, especially from Amy Poehler as Joy, Maya Hawke as Anxiety, Tony Hale, Liza LaPera, Ken Singleton, Tall Man as Riley, Lewis Black, Phil Smith, Ayo Adenabiri. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but she was from Bottoms, which was one of my favorite films of last year. I mean, all the voice acting was from everybody involved was terrific. No Soul is still my favorite anime film I've seen this decade so far, but this is definitely like in third place so far. As well as Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Oh yeah, and wait, hold on. because I remember I gave 4 animated films this decade an A plus, like Soul, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Spider-Verse 2, and The Boy and the Heron, which I think The Boy and the Heron might be my favorite animated film of the decade so far. So, but this is definitely one of the best ones this decade so far. Okay. It's got an excellent musical score, great editing, excellent pacing, some great amounts of humor, and you know what I really liked about this movie was how it was about was how the story was how the story was basically one of those like I actually like how the story became like the battle between like joy versus anxiety because let's face it, anxiety can be a real bitch sometimes. Especially what I go through. And that all the more makes it very relatable, especially with its themes and message. It's got good humor and the ending was very ambiguous yet very well executed. Yeah, overall, it's one of the best. It's one of the best films of the year so far. I absolutely loved Inside Out 2, and as of right now, I'm giving this like a 9.5 out of 10 or an A, but it might go up to a 10 the more I think about this one. So yeah, check this one out. It's one of the best anime. It's one of the best movies of the year so far. Well done, Pixar.
Next, we have the Bikeriders, and this movie was supposed to be released last year under a different studio, and even after the strikes and being sold to Focus Features, it was worth the wait. I will say this was rather slow at times and doesn't really say anything new in terms of biker gangs of the 60s and 70s, but Jeff Nichols directed this great casting that kept me engaged throughout. Everyone from Austin Butler to Tom Hardy to Jodie Comer all put the A material into their performances. The cinematography and soundtrack are also solid as well. So while this is far from perfect, I still say see this movie if you're in for a throwback to those biker movies from back in the day. I'll give it the seal of approval.
For me, this is on my list as one of the best films of the year so far. What a powerful drama this was. The Bikeriders was a powerful. Jeff Nichols, the director of Take Shelter, Mud, and Loving, really has done it again with this one. I remember when this movie was. I remember like this movie was when I first heard about this film last September when it premiered at the Telluride Film Festival, and I remember that film. That film was one of the selections for last year's Chicago. Was one of the selections for the Chicago International Film Festival last October when I went there, and it was supposed to be released by 20th Century Studios, but they ended up dropping out and the release was delayed due to the strikes. And honestly, I'm glad they got Focus Features to like distribute the film because I absolutely love this movie very much. This was a great film. My only complaint is that there were a couple of editing choices that did feel a bit disjointed and uneven, but that's it. The story felt well structured, especially with it being a slice of life drama grounded in reality, since it's inspired by true events. And you know the fact that that the setting of the film takes place in Illinois from where I'm at, and it's like. And where I'm at is another reason why I absolutely adored the story. Jeff Nichols' writing was terrific, especially with how he writes the characters and the dialogue. His directing was fantastic. The acting was terrific. Jodie Comer, Austin Butler, and Tom Hardy are all fantastic in the film. The soundtrack was also fantastic. The cinematography was terrific. Its slow burn pacing works because of how it fits the tone of the film. Excellent production values and costume design. It goes all out with the violence and drugs shown in the film, which I absolutely appreciated. And it has one of my favorite endings I've seen in the movie this year so far. Yeah, one of the best movies I've seen this year so far, without a doubt. The Bikeriders gets a 9.5 out of 10 or an A. I loved it. All right, so our next film we're gonna talk about is Firebrand, and it's based on the 2013 novel Queen's Gambit, and it's a historical drama involving Catherine Parr, played by Alicia Vikander, the sixth wife of King Henry VIII, played by Jude Law, is named regent while the tyrant battles abroad. When the king returns, increasingly ill and paranoid, Catherine finds herself fighting for her own survival. Soren. Oh my god. Now, here's what I'll say about the film. I was interested in checking this one out, given the fact that it is involving Henry VIII. And I really like Alicia Vikander and Jude Law, and they were also the reason why I wanted to check this out. And here's what I'll say about the film. The acting was terrific, especially from Alicia Vikander, who delivers such a brilliant performance as Catherine Parr, while Jude Law was menacing yet powerful as Henry VIII. The musical score felt haunting and brilliant. It's got great cinematography, excellent production values and costume design, and the atmospheric tension of the film. Oh man, it was disturbing, yet it felt real, and that's what I really liked about its tension. However, I sadly felt underwhelmed by this film. The story was a misguided mess, since it doesn't teach us all. Since it doesn't really teach us all that much about Catherine Parr and Henry VIII. The screenplay could have used some improvement on not only the characterization, but with how it should have explored more with its themes. I mean, with how they handle misogyny, that was very well done. But as for the other themes, I would think they could have done more with. The directing was a mild mess. It has some uneven editing choices, and the pacing. Oh dear Lord, the pacing. The pacing was a meandering mess. I mean, with it being a 2-hour film, you would expect the pacing to be like you would expect it to be like a well-paced movie, except there were times throughout the film where it just kept dragging on and on and on and on and on, which I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I felt a bit bored watching this one. Yeah, so that's how sluggish the pacing felt. So overall, Firebrand features terrific performances by Alicia Vikander and Jude Law, and there are disturbing yet intriguing moments here and there. Unfortunately, the film felt underwhelming and half-baked. 5 out of 10 or C+. Unless you're a huge history buff, you're not really missing much.
Next, we have Thelma.
Yes!
This movie is essentially an awfully satire on action films, as June's script plays an old woman who travels across town to face off against a couple conmen who took advantage of her. The screenplay and direction are both hilarious and surprisingly heartfelt at times, but it's the cast who truly sells this movie. From Fred Hellinger to Peter Posey to Shaft himself, to especially the main lead who deserved to have her first major role. If you're in for as much hearts and laughs as there is action, Thelma is the movie for you. I'll give this a seal cinema.
For those who don't know what Thelma is, it's about a 93-year-old grandma named Thelma Post who loses $10,000 to a con artist on the phone. With help from a friend and his motorized scooter, she soon embarks on a treacherous journey across Los Angeles to reclaim what was taken from her. This movie was absolutely fantastic. This is one of the best movies. This is not only one of the best movies I've seen this year so far, but it is a perfect candidate for the funniest movie of the year. For the funniest movie of 2024 so far. I want to get the obvious out of the way first. June Squibb, who plays Thelma Post, is 94 years old. Is 94 years old as we're talking about this movie, and my God, she was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant as Thelma Post. I mean, she has never starred in a leading role. I mean, although she's been in a lot of films before, she's never had a leading role until this one. And boy, is she brilliant. Is she really brilliant? She was fantastic at Thelma Post. Like, this is the best leading performance. This is the best performance I've seen from a leading actress this year so far. Also, this is the final film for Richard Roundtree, who you may remember from Shaft, as he did pass away last year. And like June Squibb, he also steals the entire show as Thelma's best friend, Ben. And the best way I would describe his performance, and the best way I would describe it is that this is a perfect swan song. This was a brilliant swan song for him. In addition, the story felt well structured and highly engaging. Not only was Josh Margolin's directing fantastic, but the screenplay was too. And what's fascinating about this is that this was based on his experience with his grandmother. And you know what? I really do this. I really talk about this, but to Josh Margolin, you did a wonderful job making this movie, because I'm talking to you right now. Here's what it was like when I took my mom and I to see this. Big laughs. Very big laughs, especially when it came to the jokes in the film. Like, oh man, how the jokes were like executed in the film, especially with how it had something to do with Thelma Post being inspired by Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible. That was brilliantly well written. The rest of the acting was terrific, especially from Parker Posey, Clark Gregg, and Malcolm McDowell. The musical score was great. The cinematography was terrific. It's very well edited, very well paced. The themes of aging and family felt so well executed and relatable. And not only was the ending terrific, but props to Josh for bringing phone scam, for bringing the subject of phone scam into the spotlight, because let's face it, phone scam. I mean, props to him for bringing the issue of phone scamming in his movie while avoiding like cheap laughs. Because let's face it, in real life, phone scam has been a real issue over the years, and that's why I loved how Josh Margolin brought it to the spotlight. Yes, The Beekeeper did a similar thing earlier this year, but Thelma was more well-written compared to The Beekeeper. And I actually like The Beekeeper. But yeah, I absolutely love this movie. I absolutely loved Thelma. It is the funniest movie of the year so far. It features a tour de force performance by June Squibb. And it's also one of the most heartwarming and deeply moving films I've seen this year so far. And it's easily on my list for one of the best films of 2024 so far. I love this movie. It is indeed getting a very enthusiastic 10 out of 10 or an A+. It's one of the year's best films so far, and I cannot wait. And Josh Margolin, I cannot wait to see what your next film is. I cannot wait to see it. Well done, Josh. Okay, so all right, so we got two more to talk. All right, so we got three more films to talk about. So moving on is A Quiet Place Day One.
After two of the biggest surprises of recent years, I was hoping the director of Pig would breathe some life into the franchise after part two ended on a pretty conclusive note. Unfortunately, this was a sign that this franchise really needs to end. I will say it's well shot, it has some good music and tense moments here and there, and the actors do their best with what they're given. However, here's the main problem I have with this movie: the main protagonist. Like I said, Lupita Nyong'o tries her best to make a character compelling, but her character still came across as boring, stupid, and kind of uncharismatic. I mean, Manhattan is currently being invaded by these violent creatures, and yet she stays up because she wants a slice of pizza. A slice of pizza. It's
I
because of.
would be bothered by that, but honestly, I think it makes sense that I think it makes sense of why she's like that.
I wouldn't mind so much, but except it's because of you that not only has your cat almost gotten into serious danger, but you've led to the deaths of a few people around you. Not just that, but just a few hours after these aliens invade, these people suddenly know not to make any noise in order to evade them? I mean, say what you will about the first two movies, at least they took place a few months afterwards, so you understand that they've gotten used to the new lifestyle. And though it's not incredibly stupid, it's also boring with all these scenes of the main characters just walking around the streets of New York. And it's not like the other movies where the characters are charismatic and their characters build through the scenes. Here, the main character is so boring that I just didn't give a shit whatsoever. Honestly, after this movie, they should just stop it here. I know they're making part three, but it's not needed considering they figure out how to kill the aliens nationwide. And knowing that these aliens would eventually die later down the line, it just makes this movie warrant its existence even less. I know this movie has its fans, but I was not one of them whatsoever. I'm unfortunately gonna have to give Quiet Place Day one to steal mediocrity.
This is one of our biggest disagreements. Yes, I will say that it's not as amazing as the first two films, since there were a couple since there were a couple of times where the pacing did feel a bit wonky at times, and there were a couple of decisions made in the film that did come across as being uneven and questionable. But that's really it in terms of like my issues, my issues with the film. I honestly really like this movie. I honestly really like this one. It's one of the better movies I've seen this year. So I would even argue it's one of the better movies I've seen this year so far. I mean, after sitting through a lot of some crappy horror films this year, like Imaginary, Terror, and the and the awful Strangers Chapter One. It was just so refreshing to see a horror film like A Quiet Place Day One that really scared that really had me on the edge of my seat throughout. The story felt nicely structured. Michael Sarnowski's directing was great, and so is the screenplay with the way he makes the characters feel three dimensional and fleshed out. The acting was terrific. Lupita Nyong'o was fantastic in this movie, and Joseph Quinn was also great in the film too. And the two of them shared brilliant chemistry in the film. The score, while not quite memorable, was nevertheless very good. It's got excellent cinematography, solid editing, excellent sound design and mixing. And as for the horror aspects, yeah, there are some jump scares in the film, but they didn't feel cheap, which I did appreciate. But what made the horror aspects work for me was how they relied on these two things I'm about to mention: real tension and real suspense. Boy boy, when they show the when and boy does the tension in this one feel very real, especially when with how you care for these characters and you want to see them survive. And not only did the movie have great visual effects and a satisfying ending, but let's talk about the obvious. Let's talk about the obvious phrase that everybody's been talking about. Frodo the cat. Yeah, the cat was easily the biggest show stealer in the whole film. In the whole film, like throughout the whole film, I was caring so much about the cat, and and intrigued to see if he was going to survive. I mean, to see him survive, and that's what I really liked about. And that's what I really liked about the cat in the film. And after seeing this, I am so ready to own a cat soon. So overall, this is one of the better movies I've seen this year so far. It may not be as amazing as the first two films, but regardless, A Quiet Place Day One is a very good prequel. 9 out of 10 or an A-. And it's a good thing you mentioned that, Ethan, because that's what we're going to be talking about next.
Yep, Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. Honestly, I'm not surprised this movie bombed as hard as it did, and New Line wants to bury the rest of this potential franchise because of one simple reason. This is not a movie. It's an overlong commercial for a Western soap opera, which wouldn't bother me too much, except it's not even a very good commercial. First of all, there's no story. It's just a collection of overdone Western cliches you've seen for the past 100 years, all without saying anything new about the Western genre, the settlement of Americans, the war with the natives, the Civil War, and anything. The characters are so unknown that I struggle to remember a single character trait about them. All I see are these poor actors being dragged onto Kevin Costner's hype train before it collapses into this fiery, bloody mess. And while I do appreciate the attention to detail and attention to production value and costumes, as well as the first 30 minutes, cinematography, and music, it's all for naught if it's not even clear what Costner is trying to say here. It's a stretch to say that the Western genre is dead per se, but this and The Dead Don't Hurt prove that it's going to take a miracle for it to be relevant again. Overall, this movie gets an unfortunate seal of mediocrity.
Okay, I saw the film. I saw the film this morning, and here's what I'll say about it. And I do understand why people wouldn't like this one. But for me, I honestly thought it was decent. I honestly thought it was a decent movie. Yes, there were a lot of uneven editing choices and pacing issues throughout. The story, and it was also 15 minutes too long. And the story did feel all over the place, especially with a couple storylines dragging the film down a bit. And the screenplay could have used some improvement on the characterization. And the ending where it's basically a montage to get you hyped up for chapter 2. Which, don't get me wrong, I am, but I didn't really think that montage was necessary. However, what made Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 a decent movie in my eyes was that Kevin Costner's directing was fantastic. It's very well acted from everybody involved. Not just from Kevin Costner, but from everybody involved too, including Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, Will Patton, and Giovanni Ribisi, as well as Jamie Campbell Bower. John Debney's musical score was fantastic, was excellent. The cinematography was absolutely wonderful, one of the best I've seen in the movie this year so far. It's got terrific production values and costume design, terrific production values and costume design. And although there's not a lot of action sequences, when there is, oh man, are they brutal yet powerful as hell. Oh man, like there were times where I was going like, oh. Yeah. So overall, it is flawed, but I found Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 to be a flawed but decent like start to what is a 4-part saga. And I'm definitely eager to see Chapter 2 coming soon. So Overall, it's a decent 6 out of 10 or B minus. Could it have been better? Yes. But did I enjoy the experience overall? Yeah, I did. I did. And finally, last but not least, for those also, before I move on to the last movie, I want to say this: for those who are hoping just to see a review of Kinds of Kindness and Ghostlight, you're gonna have to wait until the next podcast because I sadly didn't get enough time to see both of those films. So sorry, but I did see Daddyo, which is the last movie we're going to be talking about on the podcast before we talk about the dog and pick of the week. I mean pick of the show. And here's what Daddyo's about. After landing at JFK International Airport, a young woman takes a cab back to her apartment in Manhattan. During the ride, she and the cab driver, Clark, have unexpectedly honest conversations about numerous topics, including their past and present relationships, sex and power dynamics, loss and vulnerability. Now, I saw the trailer for this at a couple of my showings, and I was really interested in checking this one out, given the fact that I really like Dakota Johnson and I really like Sean Penn. Now, and I was really hoping that after the abysmal Madam Web, that this movie would wash the taste this movie would wash the taste out of like Dakota Johnson's mouth, because look, say what you want about Dakota Johnson. Say what you want about her. Yes, she's been like, yes, she was in that as well as the infamous 50 Shades trilogy, but she's shown to be a very talented actress. Even though I didn't like Cha Cha Real Smooth, I did praise her performance as Domino, and she was great in films like Black Mass and the criminally overlooked film from 2019 called The Peanut Butter Falcon. And in this one, this is no exception. Honestly, can Dakota Johnson just star in more independent films, please? Because that's where she shines the most. And like I said, this one is no exception. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. Dakota Johnson and Sean Penn are fantastic in this movie. Both of them deliver excellent performances and great chemistry together as two strangers who don't know much about each other until they start talking about their lives. I mean, let's be honest. Without these two actors, this movie could have been just okay if boring. But thankfully, these two actors know how to keep us engaged throughout. And that's what I really, really liked about this movie. The story, where it's 90 minutes of Dakota Johnson and Sean Penn's characters sparking unexpected conversations about those things, actually felt highly engaging. Christy Hall's directing was great, and so was the screenplay she wrote for the film, especially with how well written the dialogue felt, how fleshed out and three-dimensional both characters felt, and how well executed the themes of generational differences, digital versus analog communication, daddy issues, and the importance of human connection felt. It's got a great musical score, terrific cinematography, brilliant editing, some good amounts of humor sprinkled into the mix, and a very satisfying ending. As for issues, I did feel the film was 10 minutes too short, and there were a couple times where the pacing is a bit of a wonky mess at times, but that's it. Overall, Daddyo features excellent performances by Dakota Johnson and Sean Penn, and I found this movie to be honest, thought-provoking, and a strong directorial debut for Christy Hall. One of the better movies I've seen this year so far, and one of the better movies to come out this summer. 9 out of 10 or an A-. I really like this movie. And for those naysayers saying that Dakota Johnson can't act, watch this movie and think twice before you even say, excuse me. Watch this movie and think twice before saying that type of nonsense, because she's shown to be a very talented actress, even despite Madam Web in the 50 Shades trilogy. Watch this film.
Because if Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart can prove everyone wrong, then so can her.
Exactly.
As
All
for my
right, well, that's it for the movie reviews, and now we're going to move on to. Before we move on to the worst and best films of this year so far, let's do our usual. Let's talk about our dog and pick the show.
As for my pick of the show, I want to ask you something. Remember when the Nostalgia Critic did his top 11 movies saved by the ending? Well, that for me was this week's pick and my final Blu-ray for Blu-ray Showcase. Pedro Almodovar's The Skin I Live In.
You talk about the film. You talk about the film. I'm gonna get some water for myself. I'll be right back.
All right. It starts out pretty normal as Antonio Banderas. Starts up pretty normal as Antonio Banderas is working on new skin with a woman as his subject, as well as the ramifications that come with it all. But it seemingly turns into a different movie as it flashbacks to an even earlier point in his life where his daughter was still alive. But without spoiling anything, there's a certain twist that ties it all together, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And that completely changed the whole experience for me. So go into my recommendation: go into The Skin I Live In as blind as you can, and you'll experience one of the most fucked up movies and one of the most twisty movies you'll see in a long time. Now, as for my dog of the show, I already talked about a semi-horror film. Now let's talk about a movie that's even scarier, but certainly not the way the filmmakers intended. And it's the infamous 2005 sequel, Son of the Mask. Now, the original film was such a well-beloved classic back in '94, but this sequel's got some pushbacks. Jim Carrey eventually lost interest, and it landed itself in development hell so long that the winner for a Nintendo Power contest more or less got jipped. But I guess it's a good thing he never appeared in what it eventually came to be because, man, this was terrible.
Son of the Mask.
Yeah.
Oh God, that film.
It was already bad enough when they got Jimmy Kennedy of all people to be the new Mask, and he was far from Jim Carrey quality. But when he ends up impregnating his wife and the resulting baby inherits his mask powers, and
Like, what the fuck was that?
the resulting shenanigans turn out to be the most obnoxious and nightmare-inducing shit you will ever see in a movie like this.
Not to mention the CGI on the baby. This is terrifying. It's not funny. It's terrifying.
I could say more about this, but both the Nostalgia Critic and the Blockbuster Buster covered this movie before, and they tore this movie apart better than I ever could. So watch these videos, watch the original Mask, but stay far away from the spawn of the devil as far as you can.
Seriously, it's not worth your time. My pick. Well, my dog in the show is my dog in the show is also Son of the Mask. Son of the Mask. God, that film was just abysmal. Not just from the. It was already bad enough that Jim Carrey didn't even come back, but the fact that they got Jamie Kennedy to play the main role. I'm sorry. Look, Jamie Kennedy can be funny, but with this film, he is absolutely abysmal. And yes, I agree with you. Alan Cumming was really the only thing that was really the only actor that at least gave out a decent performance. But otherwise, stay away from this film, please. Stay away. It is not worth your time. Even if you love the first Mask movie, stay far away from it as possible. And as I mentioned before, the CGI baby. Hold on. Wait for it. CGI. This is some of the most poorly aged CGI I've ever seen in a movie. And worst of all, also one last thing about the CGI: the dog. When the dog finally gets his mask on, dear Lord, he looks so uncanny that it's honestly more terrifying than just funny. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, you think I'm kidding? Here, let me pull up the film myself, and I'll tell you how, and you'll be proven otherwise. Yeah, here it is. Here it is right here. If that doesn't scream Uncanny Valley, then I don't know what does. There's a right way to do CGI in movies, but this is not the way. A family picture. A family picture. Yeah, this was terrible. Absolutely terrible. One of the worst family movies I've ever seen in my life.
At least we can agree it's way scarier than half the intentional horror movies this year.
Yeah, really. As for my pick of the show, don't waste your time with this one. One of the worst films from 2005, and one of the worst films of the 2000s, without a doubt. I mean, it's bad when even Uwe Boll's Alone in the Darkest is a bit better compared to this. Yeah, I'm going that far. Yeah, when Uwe Boll made a better movie than you, as Angry Joe said it best, you done fucked it up now. All right, as for my pick of the show, this is a brilliant directorial debut from this particular actor, and I feel this is one of the best adaptations of William Shakespeare's play I've ever seen. It's Henry V.
Odd to see that one. For a second, I thought you were going to say Hamlet for a second.
I thought so too. While I do think Hamlet is the best one, Henry V is a close second. This is such a faithful adaptation to William Shakespeare's play, especially with how well acted, well directed, well written, and well executed the whole film felt. And Kenneth Branagh not only did a wonderful job directing the film, but his acting was absolutely terrific. Along with that, you got Paul Scofield, Derek Jacobi. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Ian Holm, Emma Thompson, Alec McCowan, Judi Dench, and even Christian Bale, all giving out terrific performances. And it has one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard in a movie. With you, we happy few, we band of brothers. Like, that is a brilliant line. That is a brilliant scene and a brilliant line. For those who are huge fans of William Shakespeare, this is Henry V is easily a must-watch. And even if you're not a fan of Shakespeare, this is still one I highly recommend watching. A great movie, and definitely the one that got Kenneth Branagh like in the stardom, and for good reason. A great film. Check it out. Okay. Well, you guys been waiting for this, and here it is. The 10 worst and best movies that Søren and I saw this year so far. Now, there there's a couple rules I want to mention before we begin the list. One, we're talking about the films that we ourselves, that Søren and I saw this year so far. So as of right now, the only film I have not seen that I heard great things about is Ghostlight. So don't expect that to be on my list. Oh yeah, and to answer your question, I think I still love Hamlet just a bit more, but this is a close second. So don't expect Ghostlight to be on the list. But I will talk about that film on the next podcast. Trust me. And let's just say, and the last thing I want to talk about is this. This is strictly our opinion on what we feel are the worst and best movies we saw this year so far. If you disagree with any of the choices, that's totally all right. That's why we have the comment section. This is why we have the comment section, because you get to fill out your own list of what you feel are the worst and best movies you saw this year so far. And please remember that art is subjective. So with those out of the way, and one last thing too, like last time on our podcast, we're gonna go over as like the previous two entries with our worst and best films of this year so far, as well as the summer. It's gonna be the same as we always do. 10th worst, 10th best, 9th worst, 9th best, and so on. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting with the dishonorable mentions and honorable mentions.
As for my dishonorable mentions, I have Argyle, which had a ton of potential but got caught up its own ass with its plethora of plot twists. A tie between Godzilla, Khan, the New Empire, and Bad Boys Ride or Die, which proved that some franchises should quit while they're ahead. And finally, the Die Inglourious Bastard itself, Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Let me go to my Letterboxd account. All right, there we go. As for my dishonorable mentions, they are Kung Fu Panda 4, ISS, Bob Marley One Love, Godzilla X Kong the New Empire, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Drive Away Dolls, and finally, this one almost made my number 10 spot, Boy Kills World.
I only have two honorable mentions, that being Abigail and Furiosa Mad Max Saga, two genre films that aren't without their faults, but are really fun, entertaining, and kind of depressing that they bombed as hard as they did at the box office, especially Furiosa, was lost over. We'll get to that piece of shit later.
As for my honorable mentions, I only have 9. A Quiet Place Day 1, Abigail, Problemista, The Taste of Things, One Life, Daddyo, We Grown Now, Monkey Man, and the one that almost made the number 10 spot, Love Lies Bleeding.
And as always, on to the top 10. My number 10 worst is a reboot nobody asked for, that being Mean Girls. This movie wasn't terrible, as the actors are trying to recapture the kind of performances of the original film, but my problem is that this movie tries to recapture the kind of classic so much that it's practically the same movie, just with forgettable musical numbers. I'm just glad people stopped talking about this movie not long after it came out, and that they can continue remembering the real Mean Girls, because this remake is my number 10 worst.
Okay. My number 10 worst was a film I just talked about on this podcast, The Watchers. Now, this movie would have been in my dishonorable mentions. Now, agreed. Just watch the original Mean Girls and call it a day. Agreed with that. Okay, so my number 10 my number 10 is the one we just talked about early on in the podcast. It's The Watchers. Now, I already talked about everything I disliked about the movie, so I'm going to try to make it brief. Despite excellent cinematography, great production design, excellent sound design, and good musical score, The Watchers is sadly one of the most misguided, contrived, and meandering films I've seen this year so far. The acting was terrible with Dakota Johnson. Oh, the acting was not that great, especially with Dakota Fanning and Georgina Campbell feeling horribly wasted in this film. And the actor that played Daniel, like I said before, that those faces that he made, like what this shit was that? Like what? And like I stated before, what really got this at number 10 on the list is the amount of exposition dumps thrown at you in the second half of the film. Like, as I stated before, for goodness sake, guys, we already know what's going on ourselves. We don't need the amount of exposition thrown at us. We're not 5 years old, for God's sake. Along with its twists and reveals that make no sense, and the ending feeling anticlimactic and underwhelming. This made such. They were the biggest reasons why this ended up being number 10 on the list. And the sad thing is, this is one of those movies where it started out okay, but at the end of the day, it fell flat on its face. One last thing. One last thing about Ashana Night Shyamalan. I'm really worried that she's gonna be influenced. I'm really worried that what worries me is that if her next movie, if she doesn't make something that's all her own, is that she needs to get away from her father and make something that's all her own, because what worries me is that if she doesn't, she's going to be infamously remembered. It's like the director that copied her father's work, and that's what the daughter that basically copied her father's work, and that's what has me really concerned. So I'm really hoping her next film is much better than this, and that she does something that's like all her own, because this was a very bad start. And that's why it's my number 10 worst.
My number 10 best is Jeff Nichols' of Bikeriders. I already talked about this earlier.
That's also my number 10.
I already talked about this earlier, but while this doesn't do anything that new to the biker game genre, the cast and screenplay really make it work. I don't have that much to say beyond what was already said, but I will say that this movie deserves a second chance on home media, as it's my number 10 best.
I totally agree with what he said, and that's why the Bikeriders is also my number 10 best. Great excellent acting, great cinematography, great production value and costume design, excellent soundtrack, well directed, well written. The story felt well executed, and above all, it was and the violence and drugs, and the fact that it went all the way with showing the violence and drugs, and how and a cautionary tale on the dangers of being a part of the motorcycle gang really makes this Søren and I's number 10 best.
Number 9 worst. You want to talk about a sequel we've all been craving for over a decade, only for DreamWorks to make every wrong decision in order to rush this out? Well, we got Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate.
Oh, God.
Like I said before, it was already bad enough that this is nothing more than an extended pilot to the Megamind Rules series with some of the cheapest animation you'll ever see. But it's also bad that the screenplay, which was somehow written by the same guys as the first one, is so lacking. It doesn't really add much to the themes of the first one, and they made the title character really stupid. So stupid that he rarely even thinks to use... you know what?
Don't worry. Hold on, I'm gonna pull this clip up. Credit to Shea Frolis, by the way.
Megamind resorts to getting all the fish guys with the dehydration gun. Cool. Hey, wait, so he'll use it on these guys, but not the Doom Syndicates? Oh, how do I stop 4 villains at once? Shoot them with the dehydration gun! So shoot them with the gun! I feel like I'm losing my goddamn mind! This is so fucking silly! I can't say shoot them with the dehydration gun! It is the easiest solution in the whole damn world! What the fuck is your problem?
That's why I had to bring it up. Credit to Shay Frost, by the way.
Point is, I'm just hopeful the Wild Robot turns things around for DreamWorks, but for now, Mega Man is my number 9 worst.
My number 9 worst. My number 9 worst was sadly the first stinker. Was sadly the first movie I saw that was bad, and that is Argyle. Without a doubt, this is Matthew Vaughn's worst movie, and it's unfortunate because it's unfortunate that this is the same guy that did Kingsman: The Secret Service and Layer King because this had a lot of potential with its concept, but boy did it fall very flat. I will say this: the only positives I have for the film is that Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell both give us solid performances and chemistry, and the soundtrack and cinematography were good. And there's a couple of action sequences that were a lot of fun to watch, but there were some action sequences that were a lot of fun to watch, but unfortunately, they were not enough to save the whole film. And the biggest problem with this movie is that it throws a lot of twists. It throws a lot of phoned in twists in your face that it makes the movie like such a contrived and meandering experience. Yeah, yes, and I already mentioned Layer Cake, and I loved X-Men for First Class. Thank you, William. Yeah, it's really unfortunate that like this movie wasted all of that, wasted such a promising concept on such. It's really unfortunate that like this is one of those movies that started out promising, but at the end of the film, but by the time the shoehorn in like plot twists come in, it just ruined the experience. Oh yeah, and one last thing I want to mention before we move on to the number 9 best. The marketing. The marketing mentions that Henry Cavill is going to be the leading role in the film. Yet he's not in the film all that much. Like he's only in like 30 to 40 minutes of the film, and then that's it. You never see him again throughout the entire film. Like what kind of marketing? What kind of marketing is that? Yeah, overall, I really did not like this one. That's why it's my number 9 worst.
My number 9 best is this decade's Ouija Origin of Evil, that being The First Omen. You all know how I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Omen, so it's safe to say this blows this out of the water. Featuring some terrific performances and visuals, and avoiding the overdone jump scares of the genre in favor of tension and subtleness. It's one of the better horror films of this decade and of this year, and it's my number 9 best overall.
My number 9 best was the first great movie I saw this summer so far, and that is The Fall Guy.
You'll hear about it later.
I absolutely love this movie. Not only do I feel it's David Leitch's best movie he's made so far, but this is such a brilliant love letter to filmmaking and the art of stunt making. My only issue I did have with the film is that there were 12% of the jokes that did fall a bit flat for me, but that's really it. The story felt highly engaging. The screenplay felt clever, intelligent, and well written. David Leitch's directing was fantastic. The acting was terrific, especially from Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, who also delivered great chemistry in the film. And Aaron Taylor Johnson and Winston Duke are also great in the film too. And on top of a great soundtrack, editing and pacing, terrific cinematography, fun and exhilarating action sequences, and brilliant use of stunts, 88% of the jolts landing very well, and a chaotic yet very fun and exhilarating third act. It made The Fall Guy one of the most a hilarious, exhilarating, and highly entertaining action comedy that I am proud to put as my number 9 best film of the year so far.
My number 8 worst is my pick for the most disappointing and most overrated movie of the year so far, Quiet Place Day 1. Like I said before, this movie wouldn't have been so mediocre and if the pacing wasn't so slow, the writing wasn't so stupid, and the characters so uninspired. I mean, why doesn't he just get on one of those boats to the safe place and get your pizza there instead of risking your cat's life? Yeah, it's safe to say this franchise is nothing without John Krasinski, and even then this series should have ended with the second one, which is why it's my number 8 worst.
My number 8 worst is the worst animated film I've seen this year so far, the Garfield movie. This movie was just rubbish. Honestly, watching this movie really did feel like Mondays. Yeah, honestly, this felt like a chore to sit through. The only positives I did have with the film is that the movie does deliver solid animation, and Harvey Gulian's vocal performance as Odie was very good. I really like how he delivers the barking noises of Odie. That was very well done, and he was the only actor in the film that actually delivered a decent vocal performance. But otherwise, this movie was terrible. The story was all over the place. For those saying, oh, it's just a kids movie, back off. Stop. You do realize that movies, whether they're live action or animated, are called family movies. Are called family movies where it's trying to appeal to both kids and adults, right? So stop with that nonsense. And I already, and there's an animated film I'm going to talk about later on the list that proves that. So anyway, the story was all over the place. The writing was atrocious, especially with the dialogue and characterization. It's poorly directed. The rest of the voice acting was terrible. Chris Pratt was horribly miscast as Garfield. Nicholas Hoult was horribly wasted as the voice of John, since he's not given that much to do in the film. And Samuel Jackson was obnoxious as Vic, while Hannah Waddingham, I found to be absolutely insufferable as the voice of the villain James. And there's nothing to her character as well, other than I'm the evil villain. I'm the evil. I'm the evil person cat who wants to take over the world. Like, give me a break. Honestly, I'd rather watch the live-action Garfield film over this. At least Bill Murray did a good job voicing Garfield. Oh, yeah, and the product placement. The fucking product placement. Like, oh my god. Like from the Sony headphones to the obvious forced parody of Netflix called Catflix, Olive Garden, to Walmart and FedEx. Like, gee, you gotta love when animated movies like this make kids feel stupid with all the product placement shown and how they're throwing an obvious and in your face modern day jive. Like, you. Like, fuck off with that shit. Yeah, overall, the Garfield movie is not only an unfaithful it's not only unfaithful to the source material, but it's also one of the most inconsistent, idiotic, and cynical animated films I've ever seen, and it's easily my number 8 pick as the worst film of the year so far. Oh yeah, and thank you for mentioning that stupid scene where Garfield references Tom Cruise. Like, good God. Yeah, my number 8 worst. Moving on.
My number 8 best is Boy Kills World, a movie that more than lives up to its title. With a tone that balances between comedy and drama, action and tragedy, and some of the goriest fight sequences you'll ever see, this movie is essentially an M-rated beat-em up on the big screen. I had a ton of fun watching it in the theater, and I'm sure gonna have a ton of fun watching it again at home. And it's a safe pick for my number 8 best.
My number 8 best is excuse me. My number 8 best is Inside Out 2. Easily the best animated film I've seen this year so far, and absolutely one of the most relatable too. I already mentioned like what I loved about this movie, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. I loved how the story was like a battle between like joy versus anxiety, which made its theme and message feel very relatable to anybody, whatever the age and no matter what generation you're in. The voice acting was terrific. It's got terrific animation. It's got terrific animation. Great humor. Fantastic. Excellent sound. Excellent musical score. Great editing. Very well directed. Very well written. And yeah, Inside Out 2 is so far the best animated film I've seen this year so far, and that's why it's number 8 on my list.
My number 7 worst, I like a good Western. I know the genre has up and downs for the past few decades, and I do give these two filmmakers credit for trying to revitalize it. But it looks like their efforts weren't enough, because my number 7 worst is a tie between The Dead Don't Hurt and The Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. Of the two movies, though, I'd say Dead Don't Hurt is about the two movies, because at least the movie had a beginning, middle, and end. It may have been rather slow and monotonous, but at least Firebrand did try to get your money's worth on the one ticket. With Kevin Costner, on the other hand, thinking that he's got the MCU of Westerns, let me tell you, sir, that you do not. Because at least the Marvel movies try to focus on making one movie good instead of just hoping to get lucky with the next 3 out of the way. However, with your barrage of Western cliches and boring characters, your movie's only going to be slightly more relevant than the Dark Universe's The Mummy Part 1 of 1 from a decade ago. So yeah, that's why your 3-hour trailer disguised as a movie is my number 7 worst, and The Dead Don't Die isn't much better either.
Okay, my number 7 worst. My number 7 worst. This is one of the worst music biopics I've ever seen. Back to Black. Leave it to the director of 50 Shades of Grey, Sam Taylor Johnson, to fuck this all up. I mean, if you want to make a movie, if you want to make a biopic on Amy Winehouse, fine. If you wanted to make a movie that shows the dangers of drugs and alcohol addiction, fine. But do it as a fucking adult and treat those things in a mature, well-detailed, and respectful manner. Not this childish, poorly written, non-factual, and exploitative bullshit. The only positives I did have with the film is that Marissa Abella gives out a very good performance as Amy Winehouse. And it's got a good soundtrack and very good cinematography, but that's it. Everything else was terrible. From the story being all over the place to the terrible dialogue, poor directing, everybody else feeling horribly wasted in the film, the editing being a scramble, massive choppy chaos, sluggish pacing, to the poorly done concert scenes, the themes of artistry and addiction feeling poorly executed, and an abysmal ending that there's nothing more than a slap in the face. Overall, Back to Black is an inconsistent, soulless, and exploited biopic on Amy Winehouse that says nothing about her life and the things she accomplished, and it's nothing more than a complete waste of time. And that is why it is my number 7 worst film of this year so far. Skip this and watch the watch the A24 Amy Winehouse biopic instead. You'll thank me later.
My number 7 best is my pick for the most underrated film of the year so far, and that's The Watchers. I already stated that this genre has her father's blood all over her, as her eye for visuals, casting, and a story that's both twisted and engaging throughout. I'll be looking forward to what she does next, as The Watchers is my number 7 best.
Next up at number 7 is one of the best prequels I've ever seen, and a prequel that I am still furious bombed at the box office. Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga. Now this isn't as like masterful as this isn't on the same level as its successor Mad Max Fury Road, since there were a couple of visual effects. There were a couple of visual effects that did look sloppy at times, but that's it. I mean, okay, not sloppy, but messy and questionable. But that's really it. I mean, the story felt well structured. The writing was terrific. George Miller's directing was fantastic. Anya Taylor-Joy nailed it as the titular character. Chris Hemsworth was fantastic as Dementis. The musical score was outstanding. The cinematography was terrific and one of the best I've seen in the movie this year so far. Terrific editing, excellent pacing, and of course, the action sequences are out of this world. Like, oh man. Like, the amount of stunts they did for the film is unbelievable. Unbelievable. But yeah, overall, I loved Mad Max. I loved Furiosa and Mad Max Saga. It's captivating, exhilarating, and absolutely one of the best prequels I've ever seen. And that's why it is number 7 on my list.
My number 6 worst is only the second worst musical biopic of the year so far, that being the Bob Marley movie. While the actors and director do their best with what they're given, it doesn't help that the story's so stark that all they did was glance at the artist's Wikipedia article and not much more research. It's not the worst movie of its kind, and we'll certainly get to it in my number 2 worst. But it's certainly not a good one, and that's why it's number 6.
Sorry, I had something in my mouth, and that's why I had to leave for a bit. But and anyway, my number 6 worst. My number 6 worst is one of the most infuriating and frustrating. It's one of the most frustrating movies I've seen this entire year so far. The American Society of Magical Naggers. Yeah, I'm not gonna say the last word like I did in the last podcast. I'm just gonna replace it with naggers. If you've seen South Park, you know what I'm talking about. Like, this movie was supposed to be a satire on this trope, and yet and it could have been a perfect satire. It could have been a really good satire, but this is one of those movies where unlike American fiction, where it says a lot with its social commentary involving Black trauma and how the media consumes it. This movie thinks it could have its cake and eat it too by basically being basically like during a sack. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, like, let me rephrase that. This movie, unlike American Fiction, where it does a brilliant job being a satire on, like, it does a brilliant job with the social commentary on, like, Black trauma and how the media consumes it, while also being a terrific family drama as well. This movie thinks it can have its cake and eat it too, by basically being a satire on the magical naggers trope, while also throwing a romantic comedy into the mix. But it just does not work. It doesn't work because of how it takes its topic it's making fun of and does jack shit with it by playing it too safe to the point where it just comes across as insulting. It had a point to satirize that trope, yet the director of the film fucked it all up. The only positives that happened to the film is that David Alan Grier gave out a very good performance, and the cinematography was great, but that's it. That's it. Everything else was terrible. From its terrible story, awful screenplay, the rest, terrible directing, a very inconsistent tone. The rest of the acting, especially from Justin Smith, being absolutely terrible. The musical score feeling generic and underwhelming. To how clumsily edited it felt. The jokes feeling terrible. The jokes being terrible. The effects looking like made-for-TV garbage. And this movie also misses the mark at satirizing the magical naggers trope while doing nothing with it. You don't make a satire about something and then do nothing with it by being a different genre. That's insulting. But it's not as insulting as the ending. Where So Swag, where it involves a gag involving So Swag. Only for it to be standing for as Society of Supported Wives and Girlfriends. I can't make this shit up, people. I really can't make this shit up. Yeah. Overall, the American Society of Magical Naggers is a cynical, frustratingly misguided, and insulting satire that does nothing with its topic it's satirizing whatsoever, especially since they played it too safe because of how it's too timid to go all the way with it. And that's due to the fact that it's also rated PG-13. Yeah, my number 6, of course. I hated this movie. It would have been my top 3, but David Alan Grier and the cinematography were the only reason why it only landed at number 6. Still, do not watch this movie and watch American Fiction instead. You'll thank me later.
My number 6 best is an overlooked gem from A24, I Saw the TV Glow.
That's also my number 6.
Featuring a story that's unpredictable and emotional, with some of the trippiest visuals this year, this movie takes the art house genre to a whole new level. It's truly a one-of-a-kind experience that I'm not going to forget for a long time, and it's my number 6.
I absolutely love this movie. I completely agree with what Søren said with this. I mean, this was one of those movies where it really felt relatable. It really felt like therapy for me because of how the main character, because of how it covers, like, the main character who's who's struggling through, like, anxiety, and it's like, hold on, because of how, like, it felt like therapy for me because when I was a kid and a teenager, I was suffering through anxiety and my life was turned upside down because of how much I was living through this dark cloud or a wall that made me disconnect from reality and feel like I was in a different place that didn't exist at all. and that's called depersonalization. For those who don't know, depersonalization is a state of mind that can make you feel alienated from real life, as if you're living in a dream or a movie. And the sad thing is, it can happen to anyone, whether they're suffering through stress, trauma, depression, or anxiety. So watching this being portrayed on screen really felt relatable, and yeah, I absolutely love this movie. The story felt well structured and highly engaging. James Schonenbrun's directing and screenplay were both terrific. The acting was terrific, especially from Justice Smith, whom I just mentioned earlier on my number 6 worst. Unlike the American Society of Magical Naggers, where he's just annoying and insufferable, here he gives out his best performance of his career. Here he gives out his best performance yet, due to how real and authentic his performance felt. Hello, Mitch. Don't you think you're going to cause any trouble tonight, buddy? Just saying. The soundtrack is one of the best I've heard in the movie this year so far. The cinematography was absolutely terrific. The editing was terrific. The themes of obsession, memory, nostalgia, and identity feel well executed. It's got terrific sound design. And while the ending will split a lot of people, I honestly found it to be one of the most devastating yet powerful endings I've seen in the movie this year so far. Damn it, Mitch! Yeah, overall, I saw the TV Blow. It's devastating, yet mesmerizing and thought-provoking, and that is why it is Søren and I's number 6 best.
And Mitch, I have something to say to you. Mitch.
This contact lens represents you, and my eye represents my eye. I got my eye on you.
Anyway, my number 5 worst is a franchise that seriously needs to die. Rebel Moon Part 2. Take Rogue One, take out all the interesting characters, story, and effects, and stretch it across 2 movies with an overabundance of slow motion, and you got this shitty duology.
And you had something to say. You had a lot to say involving Zack Snyder about this. So let it out, man. Let it out.
And more recently, it seems like your excuse of this being a tech demo of the real cut has bitten you in the ass. Because from what I hear, the director's cut is nothing more than the exact same shit, just with blood and boobs all over it. Zack Snyder, you are no Peter Jackson, and this movie is not good. Hence, the number 5 spot.
Yeah, really. I'm watching you, Mitch. I'm watching you. Yeah. Just Zack Snyder, just stop. Just go away for a while. Stop inflating your ego, man. By thinking you're like the next James Cameron or Peter Jackson. You're not. All right, my number 5 worst. Oh boy, my number 5 worst. The 5 zeros I gave this year so far. The 5 zeros I gave this year so far. At number 5, we have the first. At number 5, we have this horror film that came out earlier this year in March, and that is Imaginary, and that is Jeff Wadlow's Imaginary. Look, this isn't as bad as this isn't worse than this isn't as bad or worse than Fantasy Island, but regardless, Imaginary is. Look, this isn't as bad as like Fantasy Island or worse than that film, but it's honestly no wonder why Universal decided not to distribute that film, because good grief. good grief, this was bad. While I did appreciate the film's use of practical effects, all of that was wasted due to how poorly designed the creature felt. The story felt contrived and cliched. The screenplay was absolutely atrocious due to terrible dialogue and characters that either feel poorly developed or are just there to spout out exposition. It's poorly directed. The acting was terrible, especially from DeWanda Wise, Betty Buckley, and Tom Payne. The musical score was terrible. The cinematography is a dull mess. The editing was all over the place. The pacing was also a sluggish mess. And for a movie there are two things that really get this on the list. Number one, the third act. The third act rips out one of my all-time favorite horror films, Poltergeist. And finally, the jump scares. The goddamn jump scares. I'll mention jump scares when we get to my number two. When we get to my number two worst, but boy, I have a lot to say when it comes to that. But yeah. Overall, Imaginary, even with its interesting concept, all that feels wasted due to Imaginary being nothing more than an idiotic, contrived, and inconsistent mess, and that is why it is my number 5 worst.
My number 5 best this year has had its fair share of hidden gems, and Thelma is among them. This movie thoroughly balances humor.
I'll talk about that in a bit.
Thoroughly balances humor and heart, and it's mostly thanks to the actors, especially June Squibb, who kills it. It's an overlooked masterpiece bound to make you laugh and cry throughout, and it's an easy pick to kick off the top 5.
My number 5 best is what I consider the best A24 film of the year so far, Civil War. I absolutely love this movie. This was a brilliant cautionary tale on what our world could look, on what our nation could look like if it gets out of control. If it gets out of control. And thank you, Rocky. I can't believe I forgot to mention this. I'm watching you, Mitch. Always watching. Anyway, yeah. This is a brilliant caution. This is not only a brilliant return to form for Alex Garland following his disappointing Men film, but this is a brilliant cautionary tale on like what our world could look like if what our nation could look like if it gets out of control, while also being a spectacular love letter to like journalism. The acting was terrific, especially from Kirsten Dunst and Kaylee Spaney, as well as Stephen McKinley Henderson. It's well directed, well written. The score was fantastic. Great cinematography, excellent editing, terrific pacing. The story had me fully engaged throughout. And the third act, oh man, wow. Oh my God. Like, wow, what a third act and ending. Like, man. It really left me speechless after seeing this, and in a good way. Yeah, overall, I really love this movie, and I'm proud to put this as my number 5 best. Well done, Alex Garland.
My number 4 worst is proof that Ethan Coen isn't anything like his brother in terms of solo outings, and that's Drive-Away Dolls. This is a road trip movie that tries way too hard to be funny and wacky, and it falls hard in his face as a result of it. The editing is all over the place, especially the rush pacing, and it all revolves around one joke about dildos that isn't even that clever in the first place.
Oh my God, yeah.
I just hope his next movie is a vast improvement, because otherwise, Drive-Away Dolls is not a good movie at all, and it's my number 4 worst.
My number 4 worst is Terra. Taro or Terra, whatever. I'm calling it what it is. Turd. Because that's what it is. A big turd. Taro is one of those movies that had an interesting concept, but a terrible execution. Terrible execution. There was nothing redeeming in this movie whatsoever, other than there was nothing redeeming in this movie whatsoever. The story, cliched and contrived. The screenplay, some of the worst of the year so far. The screenplay, absolutely abysmal. What they contain some of the worst dialogue and characterization I've seen this year so far. The directing, all over the place. The acting, also some of the worst of the year so far. Besides my number one spot, which we'll get to later on. Especially with Jacob Batalon from Spider-Man, from those Tom Holland Spider-Man films, being absolutely obnoxious as Paxton. The musical score, shit. The cinematography, also shit, with its shitty lighting. The editing, a chopped up mess. The pacing, a sluggish mess. Since for a 90-minute movie, it felt like it was going on for 3 hours. Cliches, yep, they're definitely there, especially the jump scares, which I will mention when I get to the number 2 spot. And the ending, oh my God, the ending.
Yep, and here's what I have to say about all these cheap jump scares.
Yes, not scary, but who is this stuff?
Yeah, really. Oh my God. As I said, the ending made no sense whatsoever. So even despite being mauled by the jester, all of a sudden Paxton was alive. All of a sudden, because survived all of a sudden after his roommate opened the elevator door at the last second, which made the fool disappear. Like, what? Yeah, overall, this was absolutely terrible. Terrible. It's cliched, contrived, meandering, and beyond idiotic, and that is why it is Taro is my number 4 worst.
My number 4 best is Lisa Frankenstein. With this much creativity in this direction, especially the colorful visuals, soundtrack, and 2 main performances, it's really tragic that nobody gave this a chance either reviews-wise or at the box office, as it's way more compelling and creative than a lot of movies that kill it financially this year. Cough, Garfield, cough. Do give this one a watch, as it's a hell of a time, and it's a hell of a movie for the number 4 spot.
My number four spot on the list is the only Netflix film on this list, and that is Richard Linklater's Hitman. I already talked about what I loved about this movie, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. Along with terrific performances by Glenn Powell and Adriana Jonah, along with their terrific chemistry, as well as terrific writing by Richard Linklater, Glenn Powell, terrific directing by Linklater, the story feeling highly engaging, and the film having excellent soundtrack, terrific cinematography, brilliant editing, great pacing, excellent comedy, clever plot twist, and a terrific ending. Hitman is smart. It made Hitman a smart, funny, clever, and seductive, and wildly entertaining film, and best of all, a brilliant return to form for Richard Linklater. And that is why it is my number 4 best.
Number 3 worst. I thought this was going to be an easy contender for the worst animated movie of the year until I saw Søren something in July, which we'll get in a couple of weeks. But for now, for the Garfield movie. This movie takes away everything that made Garfield so iconic and just made a generic animated kids movie featuring cheap animation and an ensemble cast that isn't even trying, and jokes that are about as funny as Puppy Barter. The only thing more insulting than making me want to apologize to the live-action Garfield movies is seeing this Tree Furiosa like cat litter at the box office. That alone warrants the number 3
Which
spot.
is something I still will never understand.
And that's the number 3, of course.
Oh, you're done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. My number 3 worst. My number 3 worst is the worst independent movie I've seen this year so far. Yeah, it's Pool. It's Chris Pine's first film. Pool Man. I mean, wow. I mean, look, I heard bad things about this one, but I did not expect Pool Man to be this bad. Like, good Lord. Where do I even begin? Well, aside from the story being all over the place, the screenplay was absolutely atrocious, especially in terms of its dialogue, the characters feeling annoying, one-dimensional, and poorly developed, the tone being such an inconsistent mess where it can't decide if it wants to be a comedy film or a mystery film, as well as Chris Pine's acting and directing being terrible. The rest of the actors, including Annette Bening, DeWanda Wise, Steven Tobolowsky, Mr. Krabs himself, Clancy Brown, John Oritz, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Danny DeVito, all feeling horribly wasted in this film since they're not given that much to do. The musical score feeling like something you would find in a downloadable music library, to its atrocious cinematography, especially with its jarring close-ups, extreme close-up. Whoa! Whoa! The editing was atrocious. To its atrocious editing, the pacing feeling all over the place, the jokes they even try to throw in the film falling very flat, especially when most of it go on and 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 on to the point where you feel like shouting this.
On with it. Yes, get on with it. Get on with it.
Oh my God. And on top of that, even the mystery aspect felt shoehorned in, especially when it's revealed that it's all part of making a movie. I'm not kidding, by the way. That was literally the reason this whole mystery aspect even existed. And on top of its bad ending, this made, like, oh my God, like there was no excuse for this movie to be this bad. Like my God, this was bad. Yeah, I hated this movie. This is one of the worst I've seen this entire year so far. Pool Man is self-indulgent, idiotic, and inconsistent mess that has no idea what it wants to be, and it becomes nothing more than a complete waste of time. And that is why it is my number 3 worst.
My number 3 best is the most underappreciated blockbuster this summer so far, The Fall Guy. This might as well be this generation's Tropic Thunder in terms of its ensemble cast, tense action, and surprisingly brilliant social commentary on the film industry. I hope this gets at least a cult following after its theatrical release, and it more than deserves it, as well as deserving the number 3 spot.
My number 3 spot on the list is Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. I absolutely love this movie. This is a brilliant. Who knew that a movie about tennis could also be like a sexy and seductive movie? Like, seriously. I really love this one. The story felt well structured. The screenplay was excellent in terms of it, especially in terms of its dialogue and characterization. Luca Guadagnino did a terrific job with the way he directed this movie. The acting, especially from Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Faith, was terrific. Excellent musical score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Terrific cinematography and editing. Great pacing. The tennis match sequences were fantastic with the way they were shot, edited, choreographed, and directed. It delivers real tension throughout. It had me on the edge of my seat. The themes of identity, legacy, love, and relationships feeling well executed, and the film having one of the best endings I've seen in the movie this entire year. Yeah, overall, Challengers is one of Luca Guadagnino's best films he's done so far, and that is why Challengers is my number 3 pick.
My runner-up for the worst of the year has to go to Back to Black. It was already bad enough that you got that chick who directed 50 Shades of Bullshit to direct this thing, but to disregard such an iconic art story in terms of in favor of Bible cliches and manipulation up the ass is just sickening. Like, I'm talking Patch Adams level of manipulation. Skip this one and just stick to the Amy documentary from a decade ago, as this was such an insult to fans and moviegoers alike, and it fairly earns the number 2 spot.
My runner-up for the worst movie I've seen this year so far is, thank God William the Conqueror mentioned this one as his number 3 worst, because that is my number 2 worst. The Strangers Chapter 1. Look, I've never been a fan of the Strangers movies. I mean, the movies in a nutshell are just basically characters making dumb decisions for the sake of the plot and to pad out the runtime. That's literally all the Strangers movies are. I mean, I didn't like the first movie. The second movie was Pray at Night, was one of the worst movies I saw from 2018. Yet, what if I were to tell you that Pray at Night makes, I'm not kidding, by the way, Pray at Night makes The Strangers Chapter 1 makes Pray at Night look like The Exorcist in comparison. Okay, not The Exorcist, but look like Adam Wingard's You're Next. Yeah, that's how bad this one is. Okay, let's talk about where do I even begin with this? The story was basically nothing but an atrocious carbon copy of the original Strangers film. The screenplay was absolutely atrocious and one of the worst of the year so far, with it containing awful dialogue and terrible characterization. And it didn't surprise me that this was directed by Rennie Harlin, whom, even despite making a couple good movies like Die Hard 2, Die Harder, Cliffhanger, and The Long Kiss Goodnight, yeah, really, he did. He did. Anyway, he's made a couple good movies like Die Hard 2, Die Harder, The Long Kiss Goodnight, and Cliffhanger, but ever since then, he's been making bad movie after bad movie after bad movie, and this is one of his worst that he's done yet. And this is so poorly directed. The acting sucks. The musical score is atrocious. The cinematography could have been the saving factor for the film if it wasn't for the terrible fucking lighting. Like, good grief. The lighting was absolutely atrocious. The editing was a chopped up mess and all over the place. The pacing was a sluggish mess. Any tension and intrigue that you would find in the film is non-existent. Cliches, yes. Especially when it's nothing but characters making stupid decisions for the sake of the plot. Including this one scene I'm gonna mention in a bit. But let's talk about one of the. And to answer your question, Legend of Hercules is still worse, but this is definitely up there. Let's talk about what you guys have been waiting for. It's been a problem with Imaginary. It's been a problem with Tarot. It's especially a problem with this one. So I might as well mention it. Jumpscares! Seriously, how many times do we have to do this? You know what? Screw it. To quote To quote this one fish from SpongeBob.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Seriously, how many times do we have to say this again and again? Jump scares are not scary. If you're going to do jump scares in a movie, you need to build tension and make the scares unpredictable. When you make the scares predictable, then it's not scary. And it destroys the tension and it destroys the tension you're even trying to go for. And how about this idiotic scene where, oh my god, where Ryan is putting the rifle gun on the killer's head, as she's laughing maniacally, he yells this rubbish dialogue. Give me one good reason to not fucking kill you right now. Shoot him with the rifle gun, for God's sake!
It is the easiest solution in the whole
damn world. What the fuck is your problem? Oh my god. Oh yes, the mid-credit scene. Like, oh my god. Good god, like. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention the jump scares being, when you also make the jump scares predictable, not only predictable, but there for the sake of it, it's not scary. It's not scary. And yes, let's talk about the mid-credit scene. Absolutely pathetic. And a really cheap way to tease part 2, to tease chapter 2, which we're already getting later this year. Dear God. Yeah, really, to anybody watching, raise your hand if you think jump scares were scary back in the 2000s thanks to the internet. Yeah, really. Okay, let's talk about the mid-credit scene. This mid-credit scene was absolutely ridiculous. And it's a cheap way to hype people. It's a cheap way to tease chapter 2, which we're already getting later this year. Dear God. So basically, it reveals that Maya wakes up in the hospital as she's seriously injured. But what she doesn't notice is that as she rises up, that one of the killers is lying next to her. Oh. Absolutely. Seriously, what kind of shit is that? God. Yeah. Overall, I think this is said what needs to be said about The Strangers Chapter 1. It is the worst horror film I've seen this year so far, and the worst of the Strangers movies so far. I absolutely hated this movie, and it's easily deserving of the number 2 spot. It would have been number 1, but let me tell you, number 1 was much, much worse. But we will get to that when we get to that.
My number 2 best is hands down the best animated film this year and the best Pixar film in years, Inside Out 2. This is one of the few sequels that actually surpasses the original film as it's more compelling, more emotional, with a far more challenging storyline that could have easily backfired but thankfully didn't. The visuals and performances are just as great and memorable as they've been before, and it's bound to please both kids and adults alike. Hence, it's a fantastic contender for the number 2 spot.
My runner-up for the best film of the year so far is the funniest movie I've seen this year so far, Thelma. I already talked about what I loved about what I loved about this movie when Søren and I reviewed this earlier, so I'm going to try to make it brief. Thelma features a tour de force performance by June Squibb as the titular character, as well as terrific acting from everybody involved, including Richard Roundtree in his brilliant final performance, Parker Posey, Clark Gregg, and Malcolm McDowell. The story felt well-structured and highly engaging. The themes of aging and family felt so well executed and relatable. The comedy felt well-written and witty and clever, especially with how it has, with this having something to do with Thelma Post being inspired by Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible, which I'm not going to spoil what happens, but oh my God, this has one of the funniest climaxes I've ever seen in a movie. My mom and I, who I saw it with, we were laughing so hard at this. Like I said before, Josh, big laughs. Very big laughs. You did a wonderful job with this one. I absolutely love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. It's the funniest movie of the year so far, and that is why Thelma is my runner-up as my number 2 best.
Our number 1 worst is an infamous one. A movie that's haunted us for months ever since we saw it back in February. It's haunted me so much that for a while, I actually called it the worst movie I've ever seen in my life and worse than disaster movie. Of course, as you all know, I later reversed my decision because at least this movie had somewhat of a budget and a plot. But the fact of the matter is that this movie is so horrid that I cannot sum it all up in just a number 1 spot. I have to do a top 10 list within a top 10 list. So without further ado, my top 10 reasons why Madam Web is the worst movie of 2024 so far. Drumroll, please. Go on. Sorry, that's funny. Number 10. For a production that spent $80 to $100 million on a comic book character literally nobody has heard of, these filmmakers didn't have the common courtesy to give it as much effort as possible. Number 9. The visual effects look like something out of a CW show, like Arrow Cold, and they want their CGI budget back. Number 8. Despite the trailer featuring our forming heroes in their superhero costumes, they only wear them during the 1 minute flash forward in the middle and for 1 more minute at the end.
And what's worse is that we were supposed to get the backstory of these Spider Women, and yet we didn't because the director thought, I'm not even kidding, by the way, what the director said. The director thought it would be too greedy to give all of them a story. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Number 7. It feels like a 99-cent Terminator where the main character with knowledge of the future projects a prophesied trio from a guy trying to kill them, except with not even half the chemistry or intrigue. Number 6. The dialogue is so bombarded with endless exposition that it forgets to tell an interesting story. Number 5. The main character is so uncharismatic and unlikable that it's virtually impossible to like her, especially when she practically kidnaps these 3 innocent girls and claims them as her own. I mean, who wrote this character? Woody Allen? Number 4. The only thing worse than Dakota Johnson making her 50 Shades of Grey performance look Oscar-worthy is a horrible ADR on a generic villain. Seriously, watch that scene early on in the movie and tell me half of his dialogue doesn't sound pre-recorded on a soundstage.
And worst of all, some of the things he says doesn't even match up to his lips.
Number 3. The action sequences and webby transitions overindulge on quicker edits and having the camera spin around like it's by the cinematographer of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air intro, making the whole thing disorienting as a result. Number 2. The fan service is literally the worst by having the subplot of Peter Parker's birth completely superfluous while also butchering the famous Great Responsibility line. Seriously.
Yeah, really. And you know what's even worse? This movie calls Time Out. timeout for the characters to play guess the baby's name, and they don't even say they don't even say Peter Parker's name, even though we already know that it's fucking Peter Parker.
Seriously, when Leslie Nielsen got it right in that superhero movie parody nobody remembers, you know there's a problem.
Yeah, really.
And the number one reason why Madam Web is the worst movie of 2024 is, with its low-effort storytelling, horrible filmmaking, and all that trying to be the next big thing, it encapsulates everything wrong with movies today.
Exactly. There is no excuse for this. I agree with William.
Yeah.
And this movie has, I'm not even kidding. And to add a couple more things, this movie has some of the worst editing I've seen in the movie this entire decade so far. It makes Don't Look Up's editing look good in comparison. I am not even kidding. And this has, I'm not kidding when I say this too, this has the worst visual effects I've ever seen, not only in a comic book movie, but in a movie in general. It is completely pathetic that this movie cost nearly $100 million to make, yet the visual effects of this movie look like something out of an early PlayStation 2 game. That's how bad the visual effects looked. Oh yeah, and the product placement where Ezekiel Sins ends up getting killed by the Coca-Cola logo. That's my fucking shit! Oh. I had to walk out for a bit. Oh my God. Yeah, really, we should be grateful it bombed at the box office, and thank God it did. I never thought I would see a worse movie this decade than Dear Evan Hansen. I was wrong. This makes Dear Evan Hansen look like La La Land. It's that bad. Overall, what more can we say about Madam Web? It is the worst comic book movie I've seen this decade, and one of the worst comic book films in general. I absolutely love this piece of shit. Absolutely love this piece of shit, and that is why Madam Web is easily Søren and I's number one worst movie that we saw this year so far, and it will indeed be our number one worst by the end of this year, without a doubt. Fuck this movie. Fuck this movie. Fuck this movie. Fuck it straight to hell with a dirty dick.
Our number one best is a movie that's blown people away ever since March, and with people even calling it far superior to the first one. And so far, it's probably the front runner to win all the Oscars, but let's just see how the rest of the year turns out. But as of now, our number one best is Denisovich's Doom Part 2. This movie feels like this generation's Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, where it explores this vast lore involving distant worlds, compelling characters, fantastic music, gorgeous visuals, and some of the most awe-inspiring action sequences you'll see in a long time. It's thoroughly engaging throughout its runtime, and it left me with a ton of questions that I bet Part 3 is going to explore in spades. So yeah, that's essentially why it's my number one of the year so far.
I absolutely love this movie. It is. After seeing it again in theaters, I knew this would be number one on the list. And thank God I managed to stay there, because it is absolutely one of the most exhilarating sci-fi films I've ever seen in my life. The story felt well-structured and highly engaging. The screenplay was absolutely fantastic, especially in terms of characterization and dialogue and how they brought the religious aspect of the film. Denis Villeneuve's directing was terrific. The acting, especially from Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Florence Pugh, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Leah Seydoux, sorry if I mispronounced that, Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Rampling, and Harvey Bardem was terrific. was absolutely terrific. But Austin Butler, holy shit. What a villain he played. What a performance he gave as the villain. I knew his character was going to be sinister, but the question was, how sinister was he going to be? Well, I found out soon enough. He's like a cross mix between. He's like the Caligula of this generation. That's how menacing.
Except without any of the needless hardcore sex scenes.
Right, exactly. Hans Zimmer's musical score was both epic and fantastic. The cinematography and editing are both terrific. This has some of the battle sequences were exhilarating and breathtaking to watch, especially with how they were shot, edited, and choreographed. It's expertly well-paced throughout its 165-minute runtime. It has the best visual effects I've seen in a movie this year so far, due to how stunning and well-detailed they looked. Excellent sound design, amazing production design, and a very well-executed ending that already has me hungry to see Dune Part 3. This will easily be a deadlock in my top 3 at the end of this year, without a doubt. Dune Part 2 is an extraordinary experience. It's an extraordinary and exhilarating experience, and that is why Dune Part 2 is Søren and I's #1 best movie that we both saw this year so far. Well done, Denis Villeneuve.
And that's it for another podcast. Stay tuned in a couple weeks as we start off July and August with some of the best, like Deadpool and Wolverine, Kinds of Kindness, etc., and also some of the worst this summer has, like Despicable Me 4 or that Sandy Cheeks movie.
Don't worry, man. I'll pull up my WhatsApp app after the podcast. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed tonight's podcast. I certainly had a lot of fun doing this. Thank you guys for watching tonight's podcast, and as always, be sure to subscribe to Søren and the FilmBrony's YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. Give him the love he absolutely deserves. Give him the love he absolutely deserves. He's a very talented and fun guy to hang out with. And until we see you guys again in 2 weeks for the remainder of the June films as well as the July and August films. Hope you all have a great day. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next podcast for episode 48.